Coco Chanel was one of the first feminists. We didn't have that word at the time, but she said, women really need to be able to live the life of this age. She once said of herself, I was the first to live the life of the 20th century. She wanted women to be able to be free and move around, and she understood this idea of sports clothing. Now, it seems like a fashion shift, but it's so much more. It's a fundamental cultural shift. And because she understood that and she reacted to it, her company now is making billions of dollars, 160 stores. She's been dead for 52 years, and everyone knows her by her nickname, Coco. You say Coco, and you're like, oh yeah, you're talking about Chanel. Jan asked me a really interesting question the other night. We were talking about all these things, and he asked me, he said, well, what do you think the real trends are? What do you think is going to happen? And I thought about it for a while, and I thought, to me, the secret is not to read the magazines to see what hotel writers are telling you the trends are. It's really to look at our culture. If you had ever been an art history nerd, you would know that the zeitgeist is the spirit of the age. And every great artist in the 20th century tried to capture the spirit of their times, the spirit of the age. But I think that's the challenge that hoteliers have, is you have to really be looking at society in the broadest way. How are people traveling? What are they concerned about? What are their values? What are their dreams? And how can you help to create environments and programming where those things can be realized? I think the very first piece of the learning element, though, is to tell your story in a very exciting and meaningful way. And I put in just a group of images to really talk about how important storytelling is to all of us. It's ancient. It's the first thing you fall in love with when your mother reads you a bedtime story. You can see every culture has a history. Native Americans, narrative history was the way they recorded their history. They told those stories over and over. So it's such an important part of it. It's part of the reason we love art. He's a great storyteller. He has that thing that people have had through the centuries that have kept us all connected and made us very excited about our lives and what we're doing. I've always loved hotels because I've always considered them to be a very important part of culture. How many of you proposed to your wife at a hotel? I'm sure many of you did. How many of you had your wedding at a hotel? Give me a show of hands, because I think, many of us do that, or celebrated a significant anniversary at a hotel, or maybe your dad's 90th birthday. Hotels are such an important part of our culture, and we go there for the rituals that sustain us as a culture.
In 1924, working with community planner John Nolan, Williams developed Windsor Farms, Richmond's first suburb.
Windsor Farms from the 1920s forward was the premier address in Richmond, Virginia. It was part of the westward expansion that had begun in the 1890s with Monument Avenue and then continued westward. T.C. Williams, a tobacco magnate and a banker in this area, owned Windsor Farms, about a 500-acre parcel, and decided to create a community here, almost an English village. Virginia and Alexander Weddell were often described as being Anglophiles. That is, they saw the English culture as really the pinnacle of man's achievement. What they and many other patrons of the country house movement were trying to do is to create very elaborate stage sets that looked like English country houses. And against these stage sets, they would live a very genteel life, as they imagined life in an English country house.